Welcome to this special edition of Broadcasting Today. Today we've invited students from outside university to see how the university life works and how it's all done. Welcome to this special edition of Broadcasting Today. My name is Leila Osterbro and I'm a third year student at Middlesex University. And with me today I got Professor Kurt Barling from Middlesex and DJ Nihal from the BBC. And just to start it all off, I thought I would ask you a quite general question. So what first sparked your interest and attracted you guys to the media career?
Oh, you go first.
Mine was always music, so it was just a love for rap music and hip-hop culture, and it just was so overwhelming to me, the need to be involved in music. I started emceeing and I started recording, and then when I was at uni I signed a record deal, I signed another record deal, and then I became a music journalist, and then I became a PR, and I worked with lots of US and UK rap and French rap music. And other big artists. I've worked with Elton John and Lionel Richie and various people like that. And then about 12 years ago, a friend of mine who ran a record label, he signed Emily Sandé and Professor Green and various other people. He rang me up and said, Radio 1 are looking for a DJ to play kind of Asian beats on Radio 1. So I went for that, and I was the last of about 30 people to audition for that. Wanted to do that show. It was on the last day. It was the last afternoon to get. It was the deadline was cut off of that afternoon. I did a recording, an audition, a pilot as they call it, and I was on Radio 1 for 12 years. I just left actually just this summer. Actually, after 12 years, yeah. So that was it really. It was always music. It was always music. But then about 6 or 7 years into being a Radio 1 DJ, I started to do speech radio for the BBC Asian network. So that was a phone-in show, so that was much more about politics and social issues and religion and lots of different serious things, because I kind of saw the future, and for me my future wasn't to be in clubs DJing. No. I got kind of bored of that, really, to be honest. Yeah. I like being in clubs, but to actually be behind two turntables and going, put your hands in the air, everyone, right, at the end of the day, it's kind of boring. Yeah. I get more of a buzz. Like a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed David Cameron, and I interviewed Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, and who runs the Metropolitan Police, and I get now more of a buzz from that. So I DJ'd at Glastonbury in the summer to like 2,000 people in a tent, all going nuts, and I came off and just felt meh. Yeah. Whereas interviewing Cameron was more of a buzz. You know, that's you know, to have that kind of mental chess that you're playing with someone when you're playing. And I used to be a battle MC back in the day, so we used to clash. So for me, it's like that. It's a clash. Okay. And that I just more interested in that. So I'm just interested in music, and then that fused into being interested in current affairs and religion and the world around us.
It's a good way to combine them both, maybe.
Well, I don't really want to combine both anymore. That's why even the introduction as DJ Nihal, I don't really want to be even known as that anymore, which is no disrespect to you, but it was just a case.
Nihal is dead.
Well, it's just a case of, you know, I've done it, and I did it for 12 years. Yeah, and a long time. You know, I could be like Pete Tong or Westwood, who are in their 50s and still doing it, but that's not. I'm not really about that life. I want to do something, and also as well, you know, I've got a young family. I've got a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and you know, DJing lifestyle is not good for that. You know, it's not good. You're going to get in you know, friends of mine like Charlie Sloth and various other people. They're out 4 or 5 nights a week. They get in at 5 o'clock in the morning. You know, I don't really want to do that. My radio show at BBC starts at 10 a.m. I get in. I'm interviewing politicians, or I'm interviewing community leaders, or I'm having mad tear-ups with people, and you need to be awake for that, because if you make a mistake doing those kinds of shows, trust me, it can go really bad when you're doing those kind of shows.
Yeah. How about you, Kurt?
Was the short answer.
Oh, I started much earlier than that. When I was 6, my grandfather was a proof puller. In the old days of newspapers, proof pullers were the people who worked down in the dungeons of Fleet Street. And they put together the newspaper with all these metal plates, and he took me in there when I was 6. And I was really fascinated, all the noise, the smell of the newspapers being made overnight. And I said, oh, Grandad, you know, this looks like an exciting thing. He said, listen, boy, you don't want to work down here. You want to work up there. Because up there, they had the real power. And what he meant up there, he wasn't pointing right up there, a little bit below that. He was talking about journalism. And I thought, well, yeah, I can kind of see what he means, you know. At 6, he used to bring home the Daily Mail, the Morning Star, and the Tribune. The Daily Mail, of course, has a certain perspective. We all know that. The Morning Star and the Tribune are completely at the other end of the spectrum. And so I was dealing with a daily diet of that. So from a very young age, I had that aspiration to become a journalist. And then when I got to 17, 18, and I was having to make the kind of decisions that you guys are going to have to make soon, I fancied myself as an actor, you know. And I auditioned for the National Youth Theatre. I got in. I loved the performance. And a bit like Nihal here, I thought after about a term of doing that, do you know what? I'm going to be really bored doing that because I'm always going to be speaking other people's words. And I realised that actually I could probably have my cake and eat it by combining performance, i.e. as a television person, with my need to think for myself. And so television felt a natural way. I didn't immediately go into journalism. Of course, I went to university. Whilst I was at university, those of you who may remember, the Broadwater Farm riots happened in 1985. And the Broadwater Farm riots, I happened to be there. I wasn't throwing bricks or Molotov cocktails. I was actually there because my brother-in-law, wasn't my brother-in-law then, lived close by. I took him home, the riots happened, I found myself in the middle of it, and then I saw the news coverage when I got home, and I said, oh my goodness me, look at what they're saying. What a load of poppycock. Yeah. And I said to myself, you know what, Kurt, if you're going to make something of your learning and you're going to make a contribution, you're going to have to take seriously your objective of getting into journalism. So that was my journey from age 6 through to about 25. And then eventually I bulldozed my way through the door by not taking no for an answer and found myself at the BBC.
As you both know, journalism is a field that opens many doors. So why did you choose broadcast journalism in particular?
It kind of... See, I'm not a journalist. I'm not trained as a journalist. What I have, and I think what anyone... You can have a qualification to call yourself a journalist, but ultimately, to me, is just finding the heart of a story. What is it that really makes a story? And journalists should be just one thing, and that is inquisitive about the world, and want to just find out more about the world, and also not take anything on its face value. And that's all I was, really. I mean, I just got into this show because I did a documentary for Channel 4, and the guy who was editing the radio show saw it and said, oh, you might be quite good, come over and check out our phone-in show and host it a little bit. So I started hosting it, and then from there they gave it to me, and then we won a Sony award, which is like the Oscars of the radio industry, for it. First time the show had ever won it, and recently it got its record listening figures, and more people are listening to it now than ever been listening to that time slot on the Asian network. So it was a case of just having a instinct that told me that if you tell me the world is round, I'm going to ask you to prove it.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know, the thing about hosting phone-in shows, and the thing about, I think, journalism and filtering out, is people mistake two words, right? And that is opinion and fact. And they think the two things conflate and they're the same thing. And my job on a phone-in show is, you know, you get people, especially when you're talking about religion, they'll go, Islam says this.
Yeah.
And then the next guy will come and go, no, Islam says this. And then the next guy will come and go, no, Sikhism says this. And the next one will go, Hinduism says this. And they'll do it, and they'll keep, and eventually you end up kind of tying most people in knots.
Yeah.
Because you just kind of get to the heart of what they're trying to do. And that's what drew me into it, is just asking questions. And that's all, I guess, journalism is. I mean, I can't write shorthand. I haven't done a single GCSE or A-level or degree in journalism. And yet, when we won that award for Best Speech Programme, we were up against Radio 4, we were up against the World Service, and we beat all of them. You know, I meet journalists all the time. My show is on the same floor as the Today programme. So we're walking through that floor and you're seeing all these guys. And the main thing is if you don't have the qualifications, is not to feel intimidated by someone who does. Because ultimately it's just about how inquisitive you are. That's it, really. And if you don't have that, then you're not a journalist, regardless of how many qualifications you have.
Yeah.
I was always a performer. you know, at school, before I went to school in North London, Southgate Comprehensive School, I was always a performer. I wanted to, at school, I wanted to be on the stage. I wanted to be a leader. I became head boy. I have to say I was one black boy in a school of about 1,200. And for me, that meant, yeah, I want to show what leadership is really about, and made them elect me head boy. Nobody appointed me, got elected.
Wow.
And
You're
so,
like the first Obama.
So there I was, you know, broadcast journalism felt to me like the right place, because you could perform, not just hide on the page. I wanted to be out there. That was the first thing. The second thing, I really had this sense from Broadwater Farm onwards of a little bit of a mission to explore alternative narratives. What do I mean by that? I mean that there's a sense in which broadcast journalism has a dominant narrative running through it. And frankly, people like me weren't included, who looked like me, weren't included in that narrative. And I wanted to make sure that I was visible and challenging that dominant narrative, taking different stories, whether it be on Broadwater Farm, whether it be Stephen Lawrence, whether it be stories about modern slavery, whether it be stories or historical stories about the role of black soldiers in the First World War, the Second World War. I felt a mission to make sure that I was at the forefront of exploring those narratives in a journalistic context. Now, I am a journalist. Like you, I didn't train as a journalist at university. And it's, you know, there's a big argument about whether you have to train as a journalist at university or you do something else. The reality is, it doesn't really matter what you do at university. The point about university is to train you how to think. And sometimes you can find courses which also train you how to do. That's what we do here at Middlesex. But the journalism and broadcast journalism for me was all about that passion. And my way of conveying my passion was through my body language, through my ability to perform on a stage, not writing great creative writing in the newspapers.
You're known for championing Asian music in the mainstream media. What motivated you to do this, and were there any challenges along the way?
There's a lot of challenges trying to promote music which is essentially specialist. There's definitely challenges in trying to promote music on Radio 1 that's sung in a language other than English.
Yeah.
So if it's in Punjabi or it's in Urdu or it's in Hindi, then that is difficult to get that across. In fact, to the best of my knowledge, only one record has ever really crossed over, and that was the Punjabi MC record, and that had Jay-Z jump on it. Apart from that, we haven't really heard many other Bhangra tracks. Also, as well, the challenges is that the Asian music scene is quite a small scene, and it's not as united as the black music scene is.
Yeah.
It's not as, you know, where you get black music artists jumping on each other's tracks, and you'll see that now. For instance, Stormzy One, this new MC that's coming, Stormzy One, I'm saying his Twitter name, Stormzy, is coming through, and everyone's kind of getting behind him. Wretch and Wiley and Boy Better Know and everybody, and Krypton Conan are all getting behind him. With the Asian scene, you don't really see that as much. And there's also a lot of things about the Asian community, which is when you think about the Asian community, you think about one group of individuals, but it isn't. It's Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi and Sri Lankan, and they all have their different kind of cultural practices. They also have their prejudices against each other. So for instance, I've heard some people I know were DJing in Birmingham, and they were playing in a club which was predominantly full of Punjabi Sikhs, and they played a track by an artist called Imran Khan, who some people might know here if they're Asian, and they know because he's like about the biggest deal in Asian music, or one of them certainly. And they played this track, and these two guys came over, and these were Asians, and they said, "Take this Paki music off."
You're joking?
Yeah. So when you've got that kind of thing to deal with, it's very difficult, because the Asian music scene, the artists themselves are cool, but there's just so many internal prejudices that exist, and trying to overcome that. And really, I came from mainstream music into that. So all my connects really are not Asian music industry connects. They're connects with major record labels. But no one really cares about that. Do you know what I mean? Like, you couldn't have anyone walking up and going, "Is that Ed Sheeran? Turn that ginger music off." Like, you wouldn't have that. I mean, anyone even thinking that would be just bizarre. But the fact that you would have a group of Asians that felt it would be perfectly normal and acceptable to say that, was certainly a kind of barrier, and we felt that we wanted to try and bring so many people together. Now, I'm Sri Lankan, of Sri Lankan heritage, Sinhalese, so then people would try and create issues between Sinhalese and Tamil people from Sri Lanka, and I made it a point to play Tamil music on my show to show this is music.
Yeah.
I don't care about your religion, I don't care about where you come from, I care about where your parents come from. It's just music. Now you either like it or you don't, and that was my kind of driving force, really, to try and get that. And now there isn't any Asian music on Radio 1 anymore since the show left, but Radio 1 has to prove that it can bring music of different types, and it's done that, I suppose, with Afrobeat, for instance. You know, with playing African music, say like Fuse ODG on daytime Radio 1 is a good thing, you know. And black people have a lot of role models musically in the mainstream. Asians don't have any apart from one, Jay Sean, and Jay Sean's not really selling any music anymore. So there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you know, this whole issue of, as a journalist, do you wear your heart on your sleeve? I can remember many years ago there was a series called Black Britain. BBC launched a series called Black Britain because they felt that they weren't capturing the narratives of Britain's black community. And I was approached to be a sort of heavy hitter, hobnail boots reporter on that show. And I said no. And they kept coming back to me. And after about the 12th time I said, do you know what, Kurt, maybe you should do this. Maybe this is something you can really make a contribution towards, because you can interpret those narratives perhaps more effectively than others. So I did the show. Actually, the show didn't last that long, but it was quite successful while it ran. I'll give you an example of one story, which is very familiar to everyone here. That's the Mark Duggan story. Because when Mark Duggan was shot in Tottenham by police, one of the first people to know about that was me, because I got calls straight away from people in the community, somebody who was there on the ground at the time, saying, this is what's just happened, Kurt, I think you need to know about it. Why me? Because I had a reputation for dealing with those sensitive stories fairly. One thing that struck me with very quickly was how Mark Duggan became a black boy. It was like almost instantaneous. It wasn't a dead boy, it was a black boy, and then it became a black gangster boy, and then it became all those other cliches. And on about the first week, nobody had spoken to the family yet. And I managed to get to see his mum. And the first thing that struck me about his mum, that she wasn't black, she was white. So straight away, you had to ask yourself this prejudice, which was already out there, subliminally, because people hadn't asked the basic questions, had to be addressed. The whole question of, you can't go where he's a mixed heritage boy, and we kind of know what people mean by a black boy, but not the kind of black boy they were portraying. So for me, part of my agency in journalism has always been to try and deconstruct, to redirect people's sense of narrative on a story. And I think that's a very important part of my role. And I look forward to the day when the place is covered, the BBC and ITN and Sky are covered with black faces and Asian faces, and we don't need to worry about that. Reality is, right now, we still do.
Well, that's an interesting point that you make, because when I was covering the grooming scandal of predominantly Pakistani men grooming white girls and sexually abusing and raping white girls, and it became about Pakistani culture and asking questions of Pakistani culture. And I remember going onto the BBC News channel to be interviewed about what our show had said about this. And I remember saying to Nicholas Owen, who was presenting at the time, we don't ask all Catholics to apologise for what Catholic priests have done to young boys. And yet somehow the narrative in the news was that somehow we need to put a microscope on Pakistani culture and Pakistani people, when of course the vast majority of Pakistani people were disgusted by what these men had done. And they were saying, look, these are criminals and rapists and paedophiles. Why do you have to add that? And they were asking these questions in my phone-in show. Okay, so for instance, yesterday, a white middle-aged doctor was given 22 years in prison for abusing children, sick children. Not at any point did anyone mention his faith, his religious, his cultural background. He was just a paedophile. But they were asking the question, Pakistani people were saying, well, why are you asking us? Now, Then, because I host a debate, there is another side to it, which is why is it that Pakistani men are predominantly involved in this type of crime? So you have to ask that question, but you have to ask it with balance.
Yeah, definitely.
You can't just assume, and then that's an issue. The BBC runs a course called Subconscious Bias, and everyone in here has a bias and a prejudice. And if you think you don't, you're lying to yourself. The key is, when you're hosting debates, is to make sure that none of those prejudices come through.
Yeah.
So you're doing a debate about why is it that Pakistani kids are less likely to succeed at GCSEs than Indian kids, right? So in your head, you might say to yourself, well, Pakistani kids have more, Pakistani parents, they have more kids. So if you have more kids, you can give less attention to them, therefore they're not going to learn. So, right, so you come to it with that prejudice, right?
Yeah.
But then, of course, that prejudice doesn't pan out. It's socioeconomic reasons it could be. There could be cultural reasons about where people were put in the 60s and 70s, where they came, geopolitical. There's all kinds of different things. So you have to make sure that when you approach a debate, your own prejudices don't come through, and you really try and see things genuinely from two different sides, and you weigh up all the different options. And that's important, because we all have these prejudices, and it's really important to make sure that they don't bleed through into your narrative. Every given month, I'm accused of being anti-Sikh, anti-Muslim, anti-Hindu. Every month, without fail, someone will tweet me and going, you're anti this, you're anti that. And as long as I'm being accused of being anti all of them, I know I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
In 1999-2000, I did an investigation for Channel 4 on Britain's mosques, looking at the lack of regulation in Britain's mosques. And one of the people I stumbled across was Abu Hamza. And Abu Hamza was a piece of work, frankly. And nobody dared say it was a piece of work, because, you know, there was all the connotations. He's an imam, he's in a mosque, he must know something. And he did know something, actually. He knew how to brainwash people and get them sent off to foreign climes. Very quickly, Abu Hamza accused me of being an Islamophobe and, fatally, a racist. As soon as he
easy way to shut down a debate, isn't it? Yeah.
Unfortunately for him, of course, and ironically, people in the Channel 4 said, well, how can he call you a racist? That doesn't make sense. He's not really, you know, where's the evidence for that? And so at least it gave me a chance to continue with that story.
People of colour can be racist.
Of course they can. That's absolutely true. Yeah. But he wasn't able to provide the evidence that I was racist. But it is a big challenge for us to unpack those debates. And I still feel, as I said earlier, we have a responsibility as journalists of colour to do that.
Be brave. I mean, because when someone calls you a racist, and be brave if you're white as well. If someone of my colour calls you racist, don't just accept that. Don't just use that and go, oh shoot, I can't be racist. Oh my gosh.
No.
You know, and people will use that because they'll know, especially if they think you're liberal, they'll think it's the easiest way to exploit you by accusing you of being something and then add phobic on the end.
The debate on sexism is gaining a lot of interest in the society at the moment.
Debate on sexism?
Yeah, about the recent incident with Dapper Laughs.
Okay, yeah.
And you inadvertently stepped into this debate in February this year.
Yes.
When you stuck up for a female rapper who was threatened with rape by her opponent in a rap battle. Did you have any idea that it would gain as much attention as it did online?
No, I would have had better bars if I'd known that it was going to go. I basically just called him fat and swore a lot, which wasn't very Eminem of me, really. But yeah, I mean, for those people who haven't seen the video, it was at a club night called The Jump Off. I don't know if any of you know The Jump Off. And I was judging the rap battle. And this rapper gets up, I can't remember his name, Boom Lightbox or something. And he gets up and his opponent is a female MC who, I've got to be honest, wasn't very good, right? He wasn't very good, she wasn't very good.
Yeah.
And he thought it was appropriate to threaten, his exact lines was something like, after this, in the alley, you're going to get raped, right? And I personally, primarily because I think, you know, I've got a daughter. Secondly, because I love hip hop and I love rap.
Yeah.
And I love rap battles, and you don't have to go there.
No.
You just don't have to go there. You don't have to threaten sexual violence on a woman.
No.
in order to show your lyrical prowess, because the moment you've done that, you've actually proved you have no lyrical prowess.
Yeah.
So everyone, the best thing about it wasn't me jumping on the stage, but the entire crowd, which was a very urban crowd, I would say 60% black, they all started booing him. And they were all kind of your age. And the assumption is that your age group is riddled with misogyny. Like, you just love like talking about women in a certain way and just being really derogatory about women. But this crowd just went, no, I'm not having it. And they started booing him. Then he started cussing them. Never a good thing to do, because you've got to get the crowd on your side when you're in a rap battle.
Yeah.
He started cussing them. And then he said, if any of you lot think you can do better, come on stage. So I went, okay.
And you went on stage.
Yeah, my 5-year-old could do better than him. So I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lose this battle.
No.
So I got up, and then I persuaded, I managed to do, which people accuse me of fat shaming, by the way. So people tweet me going, oh, you know, that's really bad that you
think
you
about
think,
the fat
oh,
people.
I'm sorry I called him fat when he just threatened to rape a woman. Okay, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
I don't see parity in that, but if you do, then all good. And then loads of battle MCs, predominantly white battle MCs, I've got to say, started really gunning me on Twitter, like abuse and saying you're Captain Save a Ho and all this kind of stuff, and then saying anything goes in a battle, anything goes. So if you're clashing someone, you can say whatever you want, and you're trying to censor this creative art form. So I said to them, okay, if you were battling a black guy, would you use the N-word to him, being white? And they were like, no, of course we wouldn't do that. So then clearly, you have a line.
Yeah.
So you can't accuse me of censorship. My censorship says that if you're in a rap battle with a woman, don't threaten to rape her. In the same way as you're saying, if I'm in a rap battle as a white person with a black person, I'm not going to drop the N-bomb, because I'm going to get my ass whooped if I try and do that. So this was the kind of dialogue I was having with people. And the thing was, initially, there was always, I mean, it was on BuzzFeed, it was on Guardian, it was on Metro, it went nuts in about 2 or 3 days. And Huffington Post called me from the States and wanted to talk about it. And it was on World Star Hip Hop. And then all the haters came out. And for about 3 or 4 days, I was just battling people on Twitter who were just going, this.
How did you manage it, though?
Well, I've got, as you probably guessed, an adversarial kind of personality. So if you're going to come to me, and you're going to try and step to me verbally, then physically, that was back in the days, we don't do that anymore, but verbally, then I'm going to come back at you. So often people will say to me, Nihal, why do you respond to trolls? And okay, last week, someone tweeted me and just went, the real Nihal, which is my Twitter handle, the real Nihal is and then used the worst sexual swear word you can possibly imagine. So I just tweeted him back and said, your parents must be so proud of you for sending that tweet. They must be over the moon. And then just hashtag wasteman.
Great hashtag.
Yeah, which actually probably annoyed him more than the parents thing. Hashtag wasteman. No one wants hashtag wasteman directed towards them. And then he kind of just didn't reply. Just didn't do anything after that.
He wimped out.
He just wimped out, because most people who think they can bully you on Twitter, they are hashtag wasteman, right? They haven't got anything good to say, because who sits? But I went to a comprehensive school like you did in Essex, and I was one Asian in a school of about 1,300. It was about 10 of us, I think, in a school of 1,300. If someone came up to you and wanted to say something to you, they had to come and say it to you. And when they say it to you, it's going to go off.
Yeah.
Twitter gives people an idea. My mate once said something brilliant to me. He said, never write checks with your mouth that your fists can't cash. And Twitter is full of people who write checks with their fingers that their fists can't cash.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, strange enough, this piece I've done for the BBC One's One show tonight on trolling, I asked that very question of the troll who abused the feminists who wanted the Jane Austen on the front page of on the £10 note.
Yeah.
And the
Did he
abuse
threaten
she
to
got,
rape her?
Oh,
Yeah.
not just that, you know, all sorts of horrendous things. So I said to him, would you say that to her face? And he went, no, man, but you serious? I'm like, well, what do you put it in the tweet for then? You know, are you Apple sort of a picnic or something? And he kind of had to admit he was, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have to end it on that note, though.
Okay.
Yeah. Should we just,
We'll just get him
should we
warmed
just
up.
end it
We'll
on a
just
joke
end
or something, just to lift the laugh? Should we sing a song or something? I don't know.
Yeah. Do you have time for any questions, maybe?
Yeah, why
45
not?
minutes, yeah.
about how do you go around the question of being biased, and like how do you go around that? So how do you
when
turn
you're
a topic,
accused of being biased?
yeah, or talking about a topic and not being biased and keeping it equal? How do you go around that?
Well, so I was having a discussion on Twitter today with a young lady who was, and the BBC, look, when you work for the BBC, you're constantly accused of bias. The classic example of it is Israel and Palestinians, right? So the BBC is pro-Israel. That's it. That's all you hear. And then you have to point them to, so some girl was tweeting me today and she was just saying, why is it the BBC ignores the plight of the Palestinians? So I said, well, why don't you go to the BBC News website, put Palestine, Gaza and West Bank in it and see how many stories come up. If none will come up if we're ignoring it. Now, I can't speak for the whole organisation, but what I can say, when someone like Jeremy Bowen, for instance, goes into Gaza and Israel are trying to get him taken out because they don't like what he's reporting, then what does that tell you about the BBC? The BBC is saying, we want to get people in. So you can be accused of bias because people usually, I think, accuse you of bias because they think news is about telling them what they want to hear. And news isn't about telling you what you want to hear. You come to it with your bias, and then because we don't just echo your own bias, you then accuse us of not being on your side. But we're not here to be on your side. And I think there are times when the BBC has shown poor judgment in the way it's delivered certain news stories, without a doubt. But it's a news operation run by human beings, and trying to take their own bias and their own prejudice out of it is a constant battle, I think.
I think you need to know the difference between opinion and judgment. And as a journalist, and not just a journalist, but as a human being, and particularly when you go to university, the whole point of going to university is to learn how to think critically. And the challenge is to know when you're expressing an opinion as a journalist and when you're expressing judgment. Robert Peston was here yesterday, and he made it clear that quite often, as a senior correspondent, you have to bite your lip because you know it's opinion. It's not sourced in fact, but your judgment is sourced in fact. You've assembled the facts, and you've assembled them without fear or favour. And by doing that, you can then form a judgment. As a journalist, you're expected to use your judgment. And of course, if you're someone like Robert Peston, use your authority to express that judgment. You must recognise when your opinion, so quite often, I mean, I reported for 25 years, I would have to step aside from my opinion and tell people what I really think and give them the facts. Let people make up their own minds, which is a great thing about the BBC. Never in 25 years was I under any pressure to tell the story in one way or the other. My judgment was about following the facts trail, assembling those facts, using my judgment and my experience and the skill sets that I had, all of those things which you're going to get once you go to university, and to make sure that opinion wasn't the issue of the day. Telling the truth was the issue of the day.
I think we have to end it on that note. Thank you so much to Nihal, not DJ now. And thank you so much for Kurt Barling and for the audience who came.
Thank you for coming.